right, so while we're letting people in, it takes a minute to connect. We'll just start some housekeeping. Welcome, everybody. I'm Tahina Day O'Connor, and I'm the director of the PAGNI Health and Research Foundation. And we are at Grand Rounds today, and we are having the topic, what you think you know about coaching is probably wrong. Next slide, please. Okay, we are recording the session so that you can find it later on our website. And you are welcome to share it with other people. And we will also be sending you all the slides and all this information, including the link to the recordings. If you have any questions or comments, you can unmute yourself, or you can type in something into the chat box and we'll be happy to read it for you. Please sign in for your attendance to claim your CME or your CE if you've signed up for that through the EEDS text messaging method that I'll show you on the next slide. And then make sure to complete the evaluation surveys, not only to get your CME, but to get us some feedback. We really appreciate that when you do that. Next slide. All right, so this week's activity code is 77SLAW, S-L-A-W. Perfect for summer barbecues, easy to remember. It expires tomorrow, June 3rd at noon. So make sure you get in there and sign in. Right now, Ciamara has put that into the chat box, so you can do that right now while we're waiting. Minna Brown has no relevant financial relationships to report in the last 12 months with a commercial interest, and this activity is not commercially supported. Next slide. All right, I just wanted to tell you about an upcoming Grand Rounds. It's going to be really interesting. Our own PAGNI Dr. Kim is going to be talking about finding your reason for being. And what he's going to do is he's going to teach us about an old Japanese concept called Ikigai, which helps to balance all the things in your life so that you can really feel good and satisfied by what you've chosen to do for a living. So it's going to be very interesting, especially for clinicians, when sometimes it's hard to remember why you got into it in the first place. Next slide. All right, we're going to let Minna take it off. She has been our coach, our actually facilitator for our coaching series, which is now in its second iteration. And people are just loving it. And we hope someday that you might be able to take it. And today she is going to cover this topic that we normally cover in 7 weeks in an hour. So Minna, take it away.
Thank you, Tahina. Thank you. And I'm so glad to be with you. I'm very honored to spend this time with you guys. And thank you for the invitation. Let me just start by a very quick introduction of myself. I started out in my career in the corporate world, and you'll have to forgive me, it was in finance and accounting. So who can imagine somebody coming from finance and accounting into this world? But it is, it was a wonderful experience. And throughout that period of time, the one thing I kept discovering is my favorite part of my job was working with other people. And particularly as I had larger and larger organizations, I loved mentoring my staff and working with my employees. And that just became a passion. So about mid-career, I had an opportunity to exit the corporate world, and I had a very sweet package. And I thought, maybe I'll step back, evaluate what I want to do when I grow up, and decide what my next chapter of my career would be. At that time, I did work with a counselor and did some assessments, and what kept coming up and coming up and coming up was things like psychology, training, human resources, teaching. And I thought about going back and getting my PhD, but that wasn't practical at that time in my life with two single mom with a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I ended up choosing coaching, and it was very embryonic at the time. So I ended up choosing to move into executive coaching. I trained with some of the early thought leaders in coaching and had a wonderful experience really finding my new calling. So that has led me then to, I have been an executive coach and a coach trainer and coach facilitator for 24 years now. I'm in my 24th year. And I have never looked back. It is the most glorious thing that I can imagine doing. And I will tell you, when we have this conversation this morning, it's your afternoon now, I think you'll find that it's not what people always think it is. The easiest thing we relate to when we hear the word coach is maybe a sports coach. A football coach, a basketball coach, a volleyball coach. And someone asked this question last night in one of our PAGNI training class and said, how would you compare this to sports coach? And I said, well, a sports coach is probably almost the exact opposite of what an actual professional coach does. And so we're going to play with that a little bit this morning to help you kind of really understand not the sports coach analogy that often we are very familiar with, but what professional coaching is and how it shows up in leadership, how it shows up in your life. And then you're going to have an opportunity to practice just a little bit of taking a coaching tool and using it. So if you can later in our time together, if you can be able to join us, even if you're not on video, if you can participate just on audio, your ability to unmute yourself and participate, I think you'll find this as a really interesting activity and a fun kind of provocative exercise to play with. So let me get started. There is more than 2 decades of research that has confirmed over and over and over again the value of coaching for businesses, for organizations. In one of the studies that has been reestablished and validated and vetted several times, the original study was done by Metrics Global, and they determined that the coaching benefits compared to the expense has an ROI, direct expenses, direct benefits has an ROI of 500%. And then and that's 5 times. And then if you add in some of the indirect, a little more softer measurements and do an estimate, it jumps even to 800%. So we know that the investment in coaching is absolutely worth the time and money and energy that's invested in coaching on behalf of an organization. The second thing that shows up over and over in research, and again, one of the landmark studies was done by Manchester, coaching builds leadership, bench strength, like developing the succession plans for people who are moving on and moving up and moving around in the organization. Coaching is a huge tool for helping people advance in their career and for the organization to build flexibility and strength in their leadership team. It improves employee retention. There's unquestionably research after research that determines that employee retention improves. We've seen this in most recently, especially in the healthcare environment. That employee retention, employee engagement, employee productivity, all of these factors are positive benefits of having coaching available as a coaching tool in the organization. But I'm going to talk in a minute about how coaching as a leadership skill is a critical benefit for advancing and excellent leaders. And so the specific, and you can read that, I'm going to provide these slides to you, that these are some of the percentage improvements that we've seen when leaders and executives are provided a coach. And, at the top, better working relationships with their staff, with their colleagues, a better relationship with their managers and their supervisors, improved teamwork, and on and on. So those are some of the more interesting measured values of coaching within organizations. And then in more recent years, we've gotten more specific information about how coaching in today's world is more needed than ever. Starting back in about 2008, Google conducted a very extensive research project to try to determine, it's like fill in the blanks, what are the best skills, best attributes of their top leaders. The research included more than 10,000 both observations and interviews and surveys of manager behaviors, employee surveys, nominations from top manager awards, and just on, an extremely in-depth analysis of what their best leaders had. It's like, what's the secret sauce for the leaders at Google? That what do they have that not all the other leaders have? So you can see it took them 3 years to conduct this very deep research. And so they published their report in 2011. And you can go find this report on the internet. They called this research Project Oxygen. And there's a wonderful background story on that we won't go into, but they identified 8 very specific behaviors. I mean, delineated 8 solid behaviors for their top managers. And then I'm going to give you the results in a second. But then they also brought that study up to date in 2018. So just a few years ago, they examined these results to see what's changed since 2008 to 2011. What is it in 2018 that we need to be aware of? And not surprisingly, 2 of the existing 8 were just updated, were revised a little bit, and then 2 new ones were added. So they had a new list that produced. Now, guess what? The number 1 attribute for their top leaders globally throughout their entire organization, guess what the very first skill was? Be a good coach. Be a good coach. The best. And if you think back, I mean, it's almost logical, right? If you think back in your own career, the bosses, the leaders who taught you the most, who provided the most energy, and you felt like they were your best leaders, probably off and on in your career, I would advocate that, or I would suggest that in many cases, one of those top skills was that they were a good coach. And we'll talk a little bit more about what leadership coaching is. And then the second 2 also did not change. Empower teams, don't micromanage. And then number 3 was to create an inclusive environment and be concerned and show and demonstrate concern for your employee success and well-being. So those were the top 3 results. And that third one got moderated, or just, I think the wording was changed just a little bit. The word inclusive, I think, was a new word added in 18 that wasn't in 2011. But essentially the same top 3 characteristics remained the same, top 3 characteristics in 2018. And so, of course, this is a technology world, right? So you'll say, okay, well, this is Google. This is a technology. It's out there on the West Coast, but they're global. They have hundreds of thousands of employees. And they concluded in all of their research that becoming a great coach as a supervisor, as a leader, is essential. Technology world for sure, but I would even tell you, in my experience in the last 20 plus years, it is also true of leaders in every organization, particularly as we have a younger and younger age of our employees. Our average age is obviously becoming younger and younger. And in a world like healthcare, where high demand of talent and retention is really important, I would just tell you that I think one of the most important skills for doctors, for department heads, for leaders, even and especially in healthcare, is the skill of being a good coach. So let's talk a little bit about what coaching is. And I wanted to put that title because so many people think they really do know what coaching is. And I have a financial coach, and I have a football coach, and I have a relationship coach. I mean, they're all over the place. So if I asked every one of you to write down a little short description of what coaching is, I say often in my classes, and I see a few of our students are on the call, it is the most misunderstood words in our English language from a professional point of view. So understanding what coaching is, I think, is really important so that you can kind of pull out of those skills and use them in a way that are highly effective on the job. So I'm going to first start with what coaching is not. And so these are the things that sometimes get blurry in there, especially mentoring, but coaching, and I'm specifically talking what I might call the pure field of coaching, the professional skills of being a good coach. It is not therapy. In our profession, it is really important that we as professional coaches know the difference between coaching and therapy. Therapists are licensed. Therapists know a whole range of skills that coaches do not. And I will tell you, a lot of excellent therapists use great coaching skills in their practice, but we are not confused about the difference between coaching and therapy. We do not diagnose, we do not evaluate, we do not prescribe. Those are not in the world of coaching. So there's a wonderful white paper that's been written by the International Coach Federation, who is pretty much the organization who is the leader in our industry, about the difference between coaching and therapy and how to refer clients to therapy and what signals we might observe where we would notice that a client would benefit from a therapist. And either we would continue coaching in concert with the therapist, or we would discontinue coaching so that they would pursue therapy. So therapy is a different field, and coaches, professional coaches like myself, certified coaches, absolutely know the difference. And then consulting and advising. A lot of people have had coaches in the past who give them advice, who consult with them, who bring their expertise, and that tends over into the mentoring world. A lot of people feel like mentoring is coaching. Now, I will tell you, lots of good mentors are using great coaching skills. They're not mutually exclusive, but coaching is not mentoring. And the big difference between consulting and advising, number one, as a consultant, as an advisor, I have the expertise and I'm going to advise or tell you what I think you should do. That's what a consultant does. I know my stuff. I'm going to tell you what to do and advise you. Now, you may or may not take it, but I'm an expert. I will tell you what to do. In a mentoring relationship, I'm probably the senior statesman, and I have been in this business or in this practice for many, many years, and I will take you under my arm and I will give you maybe some advice. I will direct you in certain ways. I might help you navigate the organization as your mentor. So there's a lot of things that I bring from my experience, not just purely from an expertise standpoint, but from life well lived. I've done some of these things, and I can help you out and you can learn from my experience. That's really mentoring. And then training, of course, and training and teaching really are interchangeable. Training and teaching is, I have expertise, and I'm not just going to advise you what to do, or maybe not take you under my wing, but I'm going to teach you these skills. I'm going to train you. And so you do this with your doctors who are residents, and you are observing and supervising them, and then providing them training and feedback and those kinds of things. Training, again, wonderful, excellent trainers often use great coaching skills, but that's not coaching. Training is training. Teaching is teaching. That's not coaching. And so in the class that we teach, and as we talk about coaching, I like to share what I created as kind of a continuum of the coaching continuum from in the management world, especially, but it starts with directing here on the left-hand side. Directing is, I use an analogy. I don't know if any of you have been whitewater rafting, but I use an analogy of being in a whitewater raft, and you've got the guide sitting on the back of the raft, and we're headed into the whitewater. And let's say it's a class 3 or class 4 whitewater, and the water's going crazy. We're not going to have a conversation about how to row this way or that, up or back, forward or sideways. We're going to take direction from the guide, because he or she is going to get us through the whitewater. And then once we get through to the eddy on the other side, we can kind of debrief and have a conversation about what I could do better. And when I say row this way, etc. It's also similar to an emergency room doctor. You're not going to have a debate or discussion. You've got to stop the bleeding, or you've got to get this person into surgery. That's directing. That is flat out directing. I know what I'm doing, I'm directing, and that's on the left-hand side of this continuum. And then you move into these are not hard edges, by the way, are they? Because I know there are elements that kind of blend through. That's why these aren't hard, solid lines. It flows, because some of directing takes some diagnosis. Going back to my whitewater analogy, I have to know enough about the rapids to be able to guide us through. But you know what? Every single experience may take a little more insight. So I'm diagnosing as I go. Same thing in an emergency room. You may have to be doing some diagnosing as you're creating some direction and orders to the staff. But diagnosing involves taking the knowledge that you have, taking the symptoms that you see, understanding, analyzing, predicting, and testing. So diagnosing is not directing, but is very concrete. You know, nothing's perfect, but you have to make the best guess that you have based on a tremendous amount of knowledge and understanding. So you're bringing that in. And then you flow into consulting, where that knowledge is applied as a recommendation. I bring my expertise. I give you advice. I can consult with you. I can tell you what I think the best thing would be. So as a consultant, you might have someone from a big consulting firm come in and do consulting on operations efficiency, because they have all the gizmos about operation efficiency. Or you might have any other kind of form, but they're bringing their expertise to give advice. And so that moves further along the continuum. And then it flows into teaching. Often when we give advice, we want the person receiving the advice to learn how to do it as well. You know, that old adage, teaching somebody to fish instead of fishing for them. So the teaching may be, I would like to tell you what I think the best thing to do, and here's how to make that decision, and here's what that's based on, so that I can transfer this knowledge to you. So I'm transferring that knowledge over. So I'm sharing my expertise in a way that you can learn those tools or those skills. Then we move to mentoring. So mentoring is, again, not hard lines. It's moving over into the area of, I want to engage in supporting you. Maybe I'll give you a little advice. Maybe I will teach you the ropes in some of these areas, but also it's also a partnership. It's a collaboration. It's supporting a person in achieving their goals, usually their professional goals. And it has, I think, blends very beautifully into the world of coaching. And a lot of mentors, as I said, are really also use excellent coaching skills. But then we get over to this far right corner of this continuum, and coaching is, it's like it recognizes the beauty and the benefits of all those things. But coaching is unique in the fact that even if I have the expertise that I could teach, even if I have, God help me, I have over 40 years of experience, that I could bring that experience and knowledge base to you from a mentoring relationship. In coaching, And you're going to find, as we talk a little bit about the keys to coaching, it's one of the hardest things to do because you have to unlearn needing to know the answer. In coaching, we come from a place of not having the answer. And if we think we have the answer, we immediately have to jump into a different place in our brain. And it's really quite unhuman. It's a skill you have to learn to not be in a dialogue with somebody and immediately being solving the problem, because a coach does not, it is not my job as a coach to solve the problem. It's the coachee's job to solve the problem. It's my job to engage that coachee in a process of discovery. So I think what we really want, and the reason I think this continuum is so important for leaders in organizations, is that a manager, and I really think in any organization, but certainly in a healthcare organization, a manager should be able to span this entire range of, there are times when we're in the whitewater where you need to be directing. If the house is on fire, we need to be grabbing the extinguisher. We need to make sure that the right things get happen when we are in an urgent situation. But all the way across between handling directives, guiding information, eliciting self-learning, which is in the coaching framework. And the best managers know how to use that full range of this continuum all the way from end to end. So I'd like to share a quote that's in one of the books I really, really respect, and it's by Carol Wilson. The book is Performance Coaching. It is a wonderful book, especially for leaders in an organization, to really understand how to coach inside an organization for top performance. And so this quote, which is, and I love, she's got two books and they're two similar, but they have a different label, but she is just full of really good practical wisdom for coaching inside an organization. Coaching is a relatively new profession. So you might think about, the law profession, and some of these were created as professions back in the 1800s, accounting, which I was in accounting, 1887, I think. So the profession of coaching really was established with the International Coach Federation to a large extent back in 1995. So in that sense, it's a relatively new profession, yet it's as it's as arguably old as human communication itself. And you'll recognize this guy. Socrates is sometimes said to be the very first coach, because many of the quotes attributed to him display a coaching approach to asking questions instead of giving instructions. For example, his quote attributed to him, "I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think." And that's the coaching essence, is that I'm not supposed to teach you what I know. I'm not supposed to advise you or consult with you to tell you what to do. And often when a new client or a new coachee comes in, they're one of the first questions they'll say, "Well, but tell me what to do. I'd like your advice. I'd like for you to tell me what you think I should do." Yeah, that's not what we do in coaching. So here's what coaching is. So coaches, in the way that we look at this profession, coaches are their own experts. We use a phrase in the class that those of you who are on the call who have been in our class will recognize. We have a foundational belief that all clients, all coachees are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. We do not imagine, we do not even have a frame of reference that our client is broken or insufficient, or we don't judge. They are not wrong. There is a state of mind that we bring into coaching, that our clients are their own experts, and that our job is to help them navigate their own wisdom and discover their own solutions. And you can imagine that sounds so easy, doesn't it? It sounds easy. It is the hardest thing for these students, and for anybody who tries coaching, it's the hardest thing to do, is to set aside my need to solve the problem, which is my human instinct, my need to know an answer, my need to be responsible for a solution. No, in coaching, we have to go, nope, take that away. And we are going to be doing a process that evokes discovery. Now, and we do that with questions, but we want our clients to find their new insight. We want to evoke discovery and insight, and we listen. Man, we listen. That's one of the skills that we work on a lot. I don't think anybody is a perfect listener. We can all be better listeners. And so the first and most important skill about coaching is listening and being able to set aside our own opinions, and then asking questions, not just any old questions, but asking questions that provoke that insight and awareness. And then coaches, instead of being the expert advice givers, coaches have a process. We offer a framework for discovery. We bring to the engagement our curiosity, objectivity, lack of judgment, a safety net, respect for the person. We respect that they're whole, creative, and resourceful. We are a sounding board for them to sometimes say things, and then they'll say a little bit later, man, I have never said that to anybody in my life. And that's the safety net that we want to build, the trust and safety with the client, to be able to let them use us as a sounding board without judgment. And then we bring accountability. We become their accountability partner, because without action, nothing changes. And without change, there is no coaching. So coaching is about changing and finding solutions and creating better outcomes through the assistance and the framework of a coaching approach to that conversation. You may not even be a professional coach. If you're a leader, but you engage in coaching conversations, you're inviting that person you're communicating with to be a part of the discovery. And that's really, it is a powerful, powerful thing. One thing that the research shows, and when we teach coaching, we also blend in some tools from neurolinguistic programming and neuroscience, and we try to, not in a purely scientific way. We want to make sure we're respecting how the brain works and how our language patterns help us. And so we know that if a coach engages with the coachee, or if a leader engages in a coaching conversation, and I'll bet you can test this against your own experience, the outcomes, even if the outcome wasn't exactly what you would have chosen, the person choosing is going to be more committed to it, more motivated to do it, and it has a much higher probability of getting an actual outcome, of being delivered, than if you just said, do this, and you don't have the buy-in of the person. And especially if that person came up with the idea, then it's much more possible, much more probable that there would be a better outcome. So this is one other quote I love from Carol Wilson, and this is in the sister book. This is the earlier version of performance coaching, and it's called Best Practice in Performance Coaching. So it has some similar things in the book, but is a different book, and I love them both. And so I love her definition of coaching better than any I've read. And it's simply this: coaches open up a space inside the coachee in which there's room to look around, to see what is no longer required, what might be rearranged, and where there might be gaps that could be filled. A good coach will support, listen, and direct the coachee's focus forward to the future. A big difference between coaching and therapy too is that we don't go into the past except for looking for success factors and things. We're focused on moving forward. We bless where we are right here, right now, today, no matter what, we bless it. And we're moving forward to applying some new discoveries. So we focus forward to the future. The result for coachees or clients is that they make decisions with conviction and are more likely to stick to the plans which they have come up with themselves. It is just a great definition of what coaching is. We facilitate coachees looking inside, moving things around, throwing some stuff out, bringing some stuff in, making some decisions, and taking actions that they decide are a great way to go. And I want to be sure we have time to do this little exercise. So let me just mention these 5 elements of coaching. And this might be in a coaching engagement, and it might or might not apply to coaching conversations. So there's an important difference between having a coaching skills and being in an actual coaching engagement. And that first one is the key differential, which is the confidentiality. If I have a coaching engagement, a coaching relationship with you, then everything you tell me in that coaching conversation, that coaching engagement, is absolutely confidential. You can tell anybody you want, but I'm not going to tell anybody. And we will even have a conversation about, even if your boss says you need to get a coach, if I'm talking with you as my coachee, we only do what we've agreed to do, which in our profession is totally confidential. And you guys are very familiar with that in the medical world. Now, the coachee can give me permission, as you would if it were a patient, but it is something that we hold to as an incredibly important dimension. If it weren't confidential, how could you feel safe that you could just say anything to me, and that I could hold that in absolute confidence? But now a little footnote here: unlike medical, law, and religious organizations, I do not have privilege. If you say something to me in confidence, I do not professionally have protection. If I were subpoenaed or if I were called into a courtroom or something, I don't have, our relationship doesn't have the privilege that a doctor-patient relationship would. So that is a little different from the medical profession. But then these other factors really are true even in a leadership coaching conversation. I'm listening for, not listening to, I'm listening for the values and beliefs that you're sharing, what you're not sharing sometimes, what's the gap there that I'm listening for. I also am bringing a mindset of not knowing. I'm a facilitator. I'm not the expert. I'm not the advisor. You are the expert in your life. I am not. I am a facilitator and a partner in the process. We bring curiosity, and we ask real questions, not leading questions. Leading questions are a question form of advice. Well, what would happen if you talk to that person? Well, then you're kind of thinly veiling that I think you should talk to that person. Well, that's a leading question. That's not the kind of question that we would advocate. And then finally, we challenge assumptions. We challenge beliefs. We listen for things like inconsistencies. I know when you are sometimes talking with a colleague or maybe with a confidant, that sometimes you'll say something and then a few minutes later say something else. And those two statements might sound like they're in opposition or in conflict, or that you said this, but you've told me your value is this. How do you reconcile these things? So listening for these kind of values that are in tension with each other, or beliefs that are maybe limiting beliefs and things like that. So we are listening for those things so that we can, with grace and respect, we can still elevate those for the coachee to consider what they want to do with it. Look around and decide what they want to do with it. So those are the basic tenets of coaching as a profession. And I think this would be a good place just to pause, because the next thing I want to do is have you do a little, I'm calling it a little mini coaching exercise. And it's just going to be 10 minutes. And then we'll get back together and do a quick debrief and we'll be done. So I want to pause and see if there are any questions from what we've covered so far. And if so, just either raise your hand or unmute yourself and just ask. Okay, Aaron.
Yeah. Yes, I work as a coach actually with Pagny.
Oh, wonderful.
Have you found things like the Hogan assessment or Strengths Finders as useful tools in your coaching engagements, Bristol, Maya, whatever? Have you used any of those, and have they been helpful?
Yes, and yes, and yes. So I have a really simple model of coaching. It's probably similar to one that you use, and that is awareness building, then planning, and then action. Well, the first thing we have to do, we can't make any changes if nothing, if we don't have any new awarenesses. So one aspect of gaining some additional awareness, I do find assessments and instruments and tools like Hogan, Strengths Finders, Colby. I don't use Myers-Briggs, but some people do. There's DISC, there's all sorts of assessments.
Right.
And I am very selective about using assessments to make sure that what are we trying to find out? Because there are different assessments for different purposes. It's not a one size fits all. So I think it's often a very useful tool. And I think it's wonderful to have a dialogue with a coachee to ask, what would you like to accomplish? First and foremost is goal setting. And then would it be helpful if we used such and such assessment to just get the lay of the land? There are also very specific assessments like influence style, conflict management, the Thomas Kilmann conflict modes. There's a lot of very specific assessments that might help us with communication styles and other things. So assessments can be a great source of intel on myself if I'm the coachee. And I think we use them wisely, and we use them not as a Band-Aid for everybody,
Right.
but I think they can have a wonderful place in the awareness building. Thanks for that question, Aaron.
Sure. Okay.
Other questions? Anybody else?
I have one other. How do you deal with a reference for a coachee? Because there's clearly all kinds of ethical issues there.
And we actually cover that in one of the ethics questions that deal with references, I'm going to give the answer. Anybody on the call who's in my current class, they're going to get the answer already. So I think that if I'm in a pure coaching relationship, I am your coach, you are my coachee. I'm not your boss. I'm not your indirect. I'm not in the HR department. I'm your coach. Then and now this is my opinion, and I don't know how many other coaches out there would disagree or agree with me. I do not believe it is appropriate ever to give a reference as an ongoing coach in a coaching relationship.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't work with this person. I'm not on the floor with them. I don't see how they interact. All I know is what they've told me. And I can take that for truth, and I respect that. But I'm not in a position to legitimately give a reference for the person I'm coaching. You agree? Okay, good. And they have one agreement at least. Any other questions? And then I want to move to an activity, which I think you'll find really fun. Aaron, you'll have an edge on this one. And the people in my former classes and my current class will have a good lock on it too. All right, so here's what I'd like for you to do. We're going to split you up into either pairs or three. And the way I'd like for you to do, and we're just going to take, I think we'll do 8 minutes. So 4 minutes per side. And I want one person. Now, if we do, I think because some people can't come off mute and some people may be listening but can't participate if they're on the floor or something, I want you to do this. I want you to come off mute, and for 4 minutes, I want person A to just bring up a challenge, a question, a problem, something that you're noodling with. I mean, it could be, where do I want to go for lunch this afternoon? Or how am I going to get home tonight? Am I going to take the bus or I don't care what it is. It can be any little question or topic. And so person B, so you'll be the coachee for 4 minutes. Person B in the group, and we'll put you probably in groups of 3, so because not everybody can participate. So somebody volunteer to go 1, somebody go 2, and then if there's a third person, be a good observer. Person B is only going to do 2 things. Well, actually 1 thing. Only ask questions. You cannot tell, you cannot advise, you have to only ask questions. That's it. And one sentence, only one sentence, not 15 questions strung together. And then you're going to switch after 4 minutes, not 5. You're going to switch. And here's the kicker. Those questions that you ask have to start with one of 2 words. What? How? That's it. You can only ask questions and they have to start with only 2 words. What and how? What did you think? What did you think about that activity? Anybody? You can pop your thoughts into the chat box as well. Tahina?
I thought it was fun. I mean, you had to listen to the other person,
Yeah.
you know, and it's hard to not tell people what to do, or you're
It's so hard. You know, our natural instincts as human beings. I'm taking a neuroscience class right now, and I love the phrase that we came up with, or we learned about 3 months ago, which is our brains are prediction machines. So our brains are always analyzing and projecting and predicting and analyzing and solving and sorting and analyzing and sorting. So being a coach almost is asking your brain to work differently. So coaching is a learned skill. Everybody can learn how to be a coach and how to be a better leader and a better family person, a better parent, a better spouse, a better anybody by applying some of the coaching skills that we can. I want to advance my slide here if I can get it over. There we go. Oops, I went too far. My computer's being weird. So my final comment is that life is better, life-changing, having coaching embedded in the way you communicate with people, the way that you ask and the way you're curious and the way that you involve your non-judgment, being in the not knowing can be very life-changing. And almost all the time when we teach this and when we finish up our classes, I would say 70% of the time, the thing that our student says kind of on the way out the door is, this is life-changing. And I swear it is consistent. So I love this phrase. This is my last offering today from Sue Patton Thiold. And she's a lovely author. She's written a lot of work about finding our better selves. And I love this quote, which is, deep listening is miraculous for both the listener and the speaker. When someone receives us with open-hearted, non-judging, intensely interested listening, meaning all of our spirits expand. So with that, Tahina, I'm turning it over to you for any last comments and questions, and I'll stay on for a few minutes if someone has a question toward the end.
Great. Are you able to share your screen again? I just want to get.
Oh, I stopped the screen sharing. Sorry about that. You bet.
No problem. I just want people to have their CE code. And if you have any thoughts, we love to leave these grand rounds with one thought or word in the chat box about how you felt about today's exercise and presentation. And we'd love to see that. Again, 77's Law by noon tomorrow. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing this hour with us. I hope you learned something interesting about yourself.
Any questions? Comments, thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, I have a quick comment actually. So one of the things that is embedded, at least what I got from some of what you were presenting, is that you mentioned how the coach has you mentioned expertise, and I think by using this exercise of what, how, you really are recognizing that the coachee is the one who is the expert on themselves. And what happens when you ask questions is it just breeds that curiosity that you mentioned, so that, when you're asking what or how, you lose your own preconceived notions and the responsibility of fixing whatever it is that needs to be fixed. And it just deepens your listening. So that was a really effective exercise, I thought. Thank you.
Maura, yeah, Maura, is it Maura?
Yeah, Moira.
Maura, I didn't say that right. Thank you. And it is a simple little easy exercise, but if you can just like brand into your brain what, how, you can't ask a closed-ended question. It is open-ended. It stimulates your curiosity, and it gives such respect to your coachee to dig. So
Definitely.
thank you for that observation. It really is a glorious experience from coach and coachee.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for participating.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just go back to that last slide that I didn't have up because I think this quote is so beautiful. And I will include this in the slides that we share, Tahina, so everyone will have those few quotes that we shared.
Great. Great. Thank you. Have a great day, guys.